So Calvin and
No.
Alex, please meet Melissa.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Um,
Hello.
Very good
No.
to meet you.
it was a really fun kind of meeting of the minds. We sat
Yeah.
all together, not on purpose, the first day of class, and then suddenly it was like, oh, you guys have to join in groups and become like, have your show with people, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, Calvin had like cheetah spots on his head.
I was tiger print
Mhm.
Oh,
at that
Tiger.
time. Yeah.
I was like, I want to talk to him. And then Alex was like, I want to talk to him. And then and then it was like, oh, you like neutral milk hotel? Oh, wait. Oh my God. And then it turns out we have all of the same music in common. It's ridiculous.
This is a radio show class. It's not just like
Yeah.
a after school activity where you decide to work for the radio station, like most college radio stations. That's great.
Yeah. No, it's the best class I've ever
Yeah.
had.
Great. Tell me when we're starting. So if I start telling you stories, I know you're not losing.
Well, we just had record. We literally were just
Yeah.
recording our David Lynch and Star Wars conversations. So
Oh, great. Okay, good.
just for fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, no, we'll the idea is to put like a 5 minute or something clip on the actual show and then post the full conversation on our website.
Do you want me to add a end tag thought to David Lynch?
Oh my God, can
Please.
Yeah,
you
that'd be
please?
amazing. We would love that.
So yeah, I'm of the age where Twin Peaks was live on television. So, and I was quite young. And somehow my mother never knew really what I was watching, even though it was not like normal in my house to let me watch TV. I pretty much got away with Three's Company and Much Music, which was the Canadian MTV. But I somehow managed to follow Twin Peaks on a weekly basis when it was live on television, and I was probably way too young.
Right.
But it was the most exciting world I had ever explored, other than my dreams, of course. And then, no joke, because I ended up, joining a rock band. Well, I started working in bars at like 14, 15. And I was so part of the night music life that I never watched television again. So in college, I never had a TV. Obviously, we didn't have computers then.
Right.
And fast forward to I am pregnant at 40, and I realized that I had never watched a television series since Twin Peaks was live on TV. So when I discovered Mad Men and Downton Abbey got me through breastfeeding, like the first few months of my daughter's life. And I was like, wow, I haven't watched one since Twin Peaks live on television. And that's how and I mean, so David Lynch is the only one who's ever had the honor to have my attention fully. He's one of my favorite of all time artists, of course. He's just, and I'm so glad that his weather report, does he still do it? I don't even
I
know,
love
but I'm
the weather
assuming he
reports.
does. Yeah,
I
I love
the
him.
weather. The golden sunshine all
Yeah.
across the way. I love it.
It's another lovely day in LA.
But yeah, that's all I can say is praise David Lynch. And actually, there is one side note is that years and years later, there was this cool German French television station called anyway, Art TV Plus, I believe is what it is. And they had this cool travel show where they would bring a filmmaker and a musician, or a visual artist and a something into one of their hometowns. And I was approached by this German station that would I like to host David Lynch's daughter in my hometown of Montreal Halloween weekend.
Oh my God.
And it was like this, and it's somewhere on the internet as well as on a DVD in my house. But David Lynch's daughter is a filmmaker. She was the first youngest woman to ever get a Hollywood movie made called Boxing Elena, about the girl, the Sherilyn Fenn from Twin Peaks, who had no legs. You gotta look Jennifer Lynch was one of the youngest women to ever be funded by Hollywood to make a movie. And she was obviously David Lynch's daughter, so she had that clout too. But she was a horror movie genre. And if you look up her filmography, you'll get a sense. And this German TV show wanted a rock musician, Melissa, to host a horror movie maker, Jennifer Lynch, in her hometown, Montreal, on Halloween night. So there's this
Oh my
cool
God.
hour TV special out there where I am showing Jennifer Lynch the whole town, my punk rock roots, the club I
That's
worked at.
awesome.
We go to a haunted house. We walk under like a haunted bridge. I tell her that I'm in love with her father. It's incredible. Like, I mean, she's like, you'd be a cool stepmom. And I got to like X a little bit. I'm like, I do love him. Could I ever?
I would
So
marry
that's
David
my-
Lynch for sure.
Yes, that is the closest to David Lynch I ever got, but I was very lucky.
That's pretty cool.
That is amazing.
Is it available to watch? We are going to.
Yeah, you're gonna
sleuth.
look it up.
Well, we're gonna
Melissa
look it-
Oftemauer, Jennifer Lynch, Art TV. It's the German French. It's like public broadcasting. It's like the BBC or whatever
That's
of
going on our
Germany and
blog.
Yeah,
France.
I was
Yeah.
about to say we could put that up as like a little
Yeah,
extra.
get to know Melissa in her hometown
Yes.
alongside David Lynch's daughter. Okay, that's the David Lynch segment of the show. So then we move on to what about music?
Fun stuff. When was that with Jennifer Lynch, by the way?
That was not, it was like right before I became a mother. Well, I was a solo
okay.
artist, so it's like 2010 or 2011, you know,
Okay.
somewhere around there.
Well, we
I
were
released, yeah.
we
yeah.
were definitely interested in, and we know that you are writing a memoir, and
Mhm.
that is just the most exciting thing because you have had such a unique perspective into the world, just like in general. But then it's obviously we're here to talk about music,
Yeah.
and life, and just what brought you into the scene in the first place is what I would love
Mhm.
to hear to kick things off
Do-
with.
Yeah.
Do the listeners know that it's anchored in the 90s rock music scene?
Yes.
So
Yes,
they'll figure
well,
this
wow.
out as we speak. Yes. Yeah.
We'll give them proper warning.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, but what was the impetus? And I know you have. I actually feel
You
like
mentioned working in bars at like 14 and 15 years old and stuff and listening to music. Then I just want to hear more
Yeah.
about that because that sounds very interesting. And like,
Yeah, so I can give it, I'll refer to my memoir just because it's so helpful right now that I am like so deep into my memoir, which is my origin story in Montreal in the alternative rock scene and counterculture scene and my amazing parents, amazing city. So there's like the origin story. And then the heart of the memoir is the decade that defined me and my generation, which is 91 to 2001. So I'm halfway through. So I'm very like clear on the what is so amazing about like the way in which I landed as an actual player in the 90s rock scene, which felt like a demented Cinderella story in that I was just a kid working in bars as a music fan. So I was a ticket girl at like the CBGBs of Montreal. So I was working as a ticket girl so I could see Nirvana, Mudhoney, Hole, Smashing Pumpkins for free, but play in front of 20 people, 50 people. I mean, we're talking punk clubs, right? So I saw everybody for free, and I started at like 14, 15 going to the clubs, and they saw me as a trustworthy person. So I was like a responsible girl, and I could take the money from the people. And then I upgraded at 17. I became a cassette DJ at the main dive bar where all the musicians, local musicians, but then also all the musicians that toured after the shows would end up at this dive bar. So it's like for anyone who's been to New York in the night, like the equivalent of Max Fish in New York. So that was called Le Biftec, which was like an old divey steakhouse, Portuguese steakhouse. It was reclaimed by the local 90s musicians. So I got a job there pretty much straight out of high school while I was studying photography in college, and I was the only girl in the cassette DJ rotation there. And so that's when I really entered like a realm of not so much authority, but I proved that I lived and breathed music. Like all I cared to do was create the atmosphere in the room of the music of the time, right? So like when I wasn't at school, I was at home making mixed tapes to be able to like dictate the mood of that night, So it was like a constant obsession with how do I bring the music to the people, bring them on my journey with me. I was also very I do not take requests, because it's really annoying to line up
Yes,
cassettes for requests.
We
But
so
B,
appreciate that.
It was like, I am just playing what I think you should hear. And so that was my gateway. And then that's when I met all like the local musicians that then that taught me like that I had my first bands with, and mostly men, amazing older guys, and just so supportive of like this girl who was showing so much commitment and educating myself. I just wanted to know everything. Like, tell me everything about the gear, everything about the label, the managers, the music industry. And so imagine that's from 90 through when I joined Hole in 1994. So for those 4 formative years from 90 to 94, I was getting my like crash course by these amazing older mentors who played in legit rock bands of Montreal, who toured in Europe and toured in the US and were friends with the drummer from Nirvana. And, you know, like, so like I had a legit great community who looked after me, who believed in me. And that's when I also started my first band at the time. But by the time I joined Hole in this sort of like Cinderella overnight, like what? I had only been playing bass for a year when Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins recommended me to replace, rest in peace, Kristen Pfaff, the bass player who played and lived through this, that died shortly after Kurt had committed suicide. She died of a heroin overdose. We all know how dark both the suicide and the drug addiction of that music scene was. And just so everybody knows, I have never dabbled in either suicidal thoughts or heroin. So I was a very happy, straight, very focused person who believed that the power of music was my savior and my guide and the light of my life. Amazing. So I think that's ultimately why Billy Corgan, when he saw my band, I had a little local band that opened up for them on the Siamese Dream. And that's when he eyeballed me and he said, wow. I walked off stage and he said, one day you're going to be in my band, which was like for one of the biggest heroes in music at that time. For him to say that to me, I was like, okay, well then I never even need to see that guy again to know that I might have something. Maybe I have something. And then 6 months later, his ex-girlfriend and close friend that he was consoling in the wake of the death of her husband needed a bass player, and he recommended me. And then they just got in their heads that this unknown girl from Montreal was what they needed. And then I was asked to join that band in the wake of all that death, and knowing very well, it was like world news how dark everything was. And I said no. And then that's when Courtney Love decided that the girl in Montreal was exactly who she wanted, even though they had been auditioning people. I said no to the audition and no to the opportunity because it seemed like a very, very dark place to go. And then she ended up getting me on the telephone and telling me I need to just get on the plane and tell her face to face that I don't want to join her band. I was like, okay, maybe you're right. At least I owe you that.
Sounds like her.
And then, yeah, she was very charming and very, very direct and very, very convincing. And then that's when I flew. I call it in my book, I call it one-way ticket to Seattle, where I thought I was like just gonna go meet them for a couple of days, and then like next thing I know, I am in the band for 5 years and I've played in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and it just like was the most insane roller coaster ride. And then the moment I was ready to leave Hole, the Smashing Pumpkin lost their bass player. And so Billy called me like, okay, perfect. And I just went back to back Hole to the Pumpkins, and I got to play like, you know, an epic catalog of the Pumpkins, which had been a very big influence of mine. So that's how I got into it all. It's a very succinct, long story.
It's so insane.
Was it pretty freaky, like being on stage with the Smashing Pumpkins, then being such like a major influence to you?
Oh, it was so beautiful. I mean, like, even though like I literally said no to Billy too when he called, I had said no to Hole. Then Billy's like, okay, it's time for you to be in my band. I said, what? I just got out of this other person's band. I can't. And then that's when I realized, okay, well, I just owe it to the legacy of that influence that band had been so important to me. So at that point, I obviously had been a little disenchanted with the giant music industry and the egos and the pain and the drama that goes with corporatized magic. Like, it all was a disaster. I never liked any of it anyway. I was a girl in Montreal, never dreaming of being on a major label, like disdaining major labels. Right. I was a true early 90s ethos person of like, get those fuckers away from us. Yes. They're going to ruin our scene, which they did. And then they took it and made it into like Limp Bizkit and Lilith Fair. And then by 2001, I'm like, okay, well, I'm out of here. Thank you very much. And goodbye. I watched you kill our scene. So I was pretty disenchanted when I joined the Pumpkins in 99, 2000. I was over it, but I did it literally out of Hole. I ended up doing for the legacy of women that I realized it was my opportunity to make an impact on a male dominated field for women of the future. And then for the Pumpkins, it was for music fans like myself that had like been like, you know, given guiding light to existence through music that meant so much. So I did it like literally for the music.
Right.
And I knew it would be the best music lesson of my life, which it was, because they were some of the highest caliber musicians I have ever played with. And being, you know, playing 189 shows in 1 year, and some of the shows being up to 5 hours a night, because the Pumpkins opened up for themselves with an acoustic set. And I had to learn
wow.
a catalog of like nobody's, but so I just saw it as like soldier
Wow.
of music, soldier of music. I must learn how to play my instrument in a superior way, and I must do this for the people who love music. So I did that. And then I left in 2001 and I freed myself of the 90s.
So it's like you weren't freaked out because it was all in alignment. It was all like, it just felt like, it just sounds like there was like this like, magic involved in this
Yeah.
whole trajectory.
Exactly. It was so entirely destiny, because it wasn't me hunting for this. It came to
Right.
me. There was no question. It was like the world, the universe was going knock, knock here. And I instinctively was, no, thank you. That looks very hard. That seems crazy. But then there would be a moment where it's like, oh, this is too big of a crossroads for me to deny that there's like must be meaning here. Like to not take this road would be to take a lesser road. This is the hard, wild road for a reason that's being presented to me. And then also mainly music. You can't say no to music if it is your calling.
Right.
If
Yeah,
your
very
calling
true.
is like music is going, you know, the greatest, you know, universal language in the world, you're not going to say no if you're being given more opportunities to immerse yourself in a world where those on stage and those in the audience are devoted, like our version of church, for all of these lost youth who had, you know, totally lost faith in
Right.
what our parents' generations and grandparents' generations had at their core. So we were seeking hardcore, and my memoir has so much to do with what was the spiritual and emotional reality of this scene that followed the birth canal of the 21st century. I mean, you see when you look back at that music and those individuals, the amount of pain, and I call it warning and mourning. It was just like so much visceral reaction to like wanting to share our feelings while it being all like scary feelings.
Right.
And I'm completely convinced that it was like, you know, it was part of the sort of mourning of the end of the sort of, you know, brief moment in stupid human history where we thought we got shit together by industrialization and essentially organized religion, you know. And so somewhere in there, all these parts were starting to fall apart, which we now welcome to the 21st century. The systems don't work very well. And yes, the corporations bought everything, including your elected officials, including your own fucking voice on social media. They bought everything. And that's what our generation knew was happening. So I talk in my book about this sort of painful gateway that we ushered in, and we were aware. And when I think about writing the book, I think about doing it for my 12-year-old daughter and her friends. Like, we were not asleep at the wheel. We saw what was coming and we were screaming about it. We were like, looks like a bad direction. Holy shit, warning, warning. And then Y2K, 9/11, Iraq War, wherever we are now, it's just like just a plummet. It was, you know, heartbreaking.
Yeah,
but
the commoditization
music,
of
exactly.
that rawness, just it was never going to work.
Exactly. It's playing, you know, it's trying to bottle magic. And the working title for my book is Magic, Music, and Death. And those are the reoccurring themes in the arc of my life while serving and honoring music. And mainly for me, honoring music is honoring the beauty in humanity. And, you know, even though I think the world is full of shit at the moment, and I'm not saying that World War II wasn't as hard. Of course, we go through terrible moments, you know, but between climate, corporate greed, multiple world wars, and then now this new layer of social media being able to just divide families and humans, which is like a dumb little click. We're not in a good, like, hopeful moment for humans to get along and find peace and harmony. But I still always believe in the power of music and the beauty of humanity when you come together in something as beautiful as music or art,
Oh,
or spirituality. Like they're all the same to me, and they're all eternal.
yes.
And we know that in dark times, people will gravitate towards that more. And that's what I feel like I'm trying to hope to capture, is that we're going to need that, and we need documents of that, of faith in those ways.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
And that's honestly what brings us together here to celebrate music every week on this show.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Just
transformative.
the love for the art and everything, and just like something that's been such a base and like core aspect of humanity for like the entire time
Yep.
of our existence, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's an extremely important thing.
No doubt.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have such you have such a coherent and clear voice. So it makes me feel like that decade wasn't a blur for you. Like you would probably have clear memories of distinct shows. You know what I mean? Like,
Everything,
yeah.
everything.
Wow.
But Johnny, I also was I was in art school as a photographer, and I was obsessively documenting. So in photography, I was
Right.
exploring a thing called like self-portraiture and trying to document human existence through photography. So when I joined the band, I was ripped away from my art practice, which was a very inner journey of human expression and existence through the quiet observational lens of a camera. So when I got on the road, my photography practice went onto overdrive because it was the only thing to keep me sane. So I have 30,000 negatives. I would take up to a roll of film a day. Every crowd, every backstage, every hotel room. So I have, for the last 3 years, archiving my entire photography collection, as well as the ephemera, because I didn't throw one tour diary, like one tour book, or the facts of like the lobby call at 8 o'clock, interview with XYZ local radio station. I have all of it archived and put into this incredible system that these amazing Bard graduate photography
Yes.
archivists came and like built the system for me. So what's so amazing is that my mind totally remembers everything, and then I have this backup to when I know what I'm writing about. I go into the archive of like July of 1995, Lollapalooza. Oh wow, okay, there's the show poster, there's the order of the set list that night. There's the picture
Wait,
of me in Boston.
I'm so sorry. You have got to be kidding me. That's actually a
Yeah.
question I was at that show, Lollapalooza 1995, in Cuyahoga Falls Blossom Music Center. I saw that show. Just
Excellent.
putting that out there. Yeah. And
That
then
was
we
a
became
cool-
buddies later on. Who knew?
Yes.
Who could have
Are you going to
saw
play
that?
music on this show? Are you playing music?
We are. We
Yes.
actually were hoping you would tell us maybe what your absolute penultimate, no, not penultimate, the ultimate.
Yeah.
Number one, what represents that era for you most?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think the two that I would say, as the music fan who worship the Smashing Pumpkins, who the first song off their first album, Gish, I Am One, was the song that changed my life. Like I truly heard it in front of 10 people at the club that night, and it was like whoosh, like universe clouds parting, and I heard the sounds of my inside. So that song, I Am One by the Pumpkins, was like the gateway for me. And then when I joined Hole, it's funny, is I actually wasn't a fan. I had seen Hole play, and I was more horrified and inspired, and I couldn't believe my eyes, even though I was like, okay, I get it, she's trying to push the buttons here, cool. But it was not my cup of tea, neither musically nor philosophically. I was much more of like an abstract spirit seeker.
Yes.
And then there's this like slut, fuck, like it was just like, what the hell is happening? But I grew to really appreciate the band, of course, because I had to embody the message and the mission. And when I joined the band, for everyone to know, Live Through This was released the week that Kurt Cobain killed himself. Like people who, this whole Kurt and Courtney, I'm just going to take a moment to any listeners out there that have ever been duped to fall for whatever these algorithms are that Courtney killed Kurt. Like, do you know we live in a sexist society? Anybody? Does anybody know that strong, difficult, weird women that even I was afraid of are not demonized and destroyed, especially when you're Jesus Christ, victim of the world of corporate takeover? Kurt kills himself. Like, do not blame the wife. Did anyone learn from Yoko and John? This is it's such a replay of it. It's so pathetic. And even I, who saw this woman is nuts. Like, this is really, but I instantly was given a world education on how society responds to witches, to Medusa, to like the warrior goddesses. So I have like a, obviously a big part of my book. Meanwhile, I was like the virgin to her whore. I was like a happy Canadian, hippie Canadian to like the maniac American. So I was my persona was developed by being to her right as like this good girl. And we, and she knew what she was doing. She was developing that. And then in my book, I'm also reflecting on how I fell into that. I had to be her sidekick.
Wow.
And with all of that, I got to witness how society treated her, and it was sick. Like and what's so cool about her, I'm now like back in touch with her very beautifully. Her integrity and her strength is so hardcore. She's like, no one owes me an apology. This woman has never been a victim and never will be. Her integrity of self and strength is mind-boggling, and she should have been dead 100 times and is not.
Right.
So she deserves a little bit of more respect. But back to the Kurt thing, it wasn't even lost on me then that her husband committed suicide and left her and their 2-year-old daughter the same week that her album was coming out. Shit. And so imagine like that record, which for people who should listen to live through this, because it is a seminal fucking page turning moment in women's liberation one of the most important feminist records ever made.
Yes.
And it still lives in the shadow of some guy who killed himself. Like I'm sorry, I'm sure he was very, very sick and mentally, unstable, but to do that to a child and a woman is not honorable. I don't care what happened to you. Like, it's like, so I've always been very protective of Francis and Courtney for that reason. And then also of the record. So by the time I joined they had like, the record was like already, been set to come out for, a long time at that date. So if it came out, he died on whatever it was, April 5th, and the record was like April 7th or something insane. Imagine what it came out into, So by the time I joined, that was in April, and I joined in July. They were onto they had launched with Miss World with a video for a bass player who was still alive, Kristen. And then their second single was Doll Parts. All of these songs are fucking incredible, and I urge you to play any and all of them.
Yes.
And Doll Parts had her friend Jennifer Lynch from L7 filling in Kristen. And then when I arrived, the third single, which is the one I'm going to say, if you can only play one, play Violet. It's the first music video I made, and it was like a big deal. Like, I remember I'd only been in the band for like a month, and there we were in LA, like shooting on a big sound stage, and I'm like, wow, what is it? And it was like, and I have my diary entry of what it felt like to perform lip syncing in front of a camera, knowing it was going to go to MTV. And it was like this whole self-awareness of like, okay, I just did it. I just put myself into the public ether. Wow. And like, so that was a big moment in song. And I think that song is incredible.
It dawns on me that you have had to sacrifice a lot for this medium. Because there's this tension. You're standing in this mirror. It's not what you signed up for, but then
and it wasn't even what I wanted, other than Destiny told me I should do it, and I obliged.
Right.
And it was mainly, so I am also like deep. You happen to be catching me in the moment of the book where I am on tour for Live Through This, and I am reading my diary entries, because a lot of it is actually in that particular tour so like sensory overload, where I barely think, God, I have my letters to my friends back home and my diaries, and I'm describing this armor that I am building of this like lone wolf, shut down, quiet person that just has to protect her feelings, protect her body, protect everything. So I had to like cultivate this sort of shut down thing to protect. So I'd say the biggest sacrifice, even though, I would have liked to have been in art school. I would have liked to have, friends or boyfriends. Like, I couldn't have anything normal. It's fine. I don't mind sacrificing that. I don't believe in normal, so it's fine. But it was mainly sacrificing my purity of my emotions, of just.
Yeah.
But I did a great job. Okay. I'm here to tell the tale. I have a 12-year-old daughter that I'm like, here
River.
as her like Viking mother of like, you're going to
Mhm.
feel everything. And I'm going to let you lock yourself in the bathroom at 12 years old on the morning of her 12th birthday. And her like, I don't want to get older and the world is mean. I'm
Oh,
like, I hear you.
Oh,
I'm here and I'm
oh.
going to let you feel this because it's scary to feel real things.
Hmm.
Mhm.
No
Yeah.
doubt. I don't even know what, I mean, to grow up in this time, I can't even.
Yeah.
it's scary.
Yeah.
For the
Sure.
people,
All
yeah,
I
growing
can
up
tell
now.
you is that those that are super small, like I've always said that the pandemic thing, hardest for college age kids and old people, like just like what, this is how you're coming out into the world or leaving the world. Like that's seems like such a sad, but those younger than college age are the ones who are like kind of setting out on their own, like my daughter and all the elementary school age that came into it. The only thing I can say to help me feel less concerned about the unknown future that we are setting them up for is that they are built waiting for doom to be around the corner. They have
Mhm.
only known that crisis between the insurrection and then and the pandemic and this lockdown. And I mean,
Yeah.
that's going to be part of their reality. And if we're lucky, it might lighten up a bit. But at the rate that everything is looking at between climate and fascism, I don't imagine it's going to lighten up. And they're just going to be stronger than we ever had to be. And I
Mm.
often say that my generation are the ones that are probably having the biggest heartbreak because when we were 12, we were convinced by our parents who had fought like 60s radical revolutions, and my parents were at the forefront changing what is normal, breaking down the absurd boxes that had trapped people in the 50s into like ideas of whatever you're supposed to be. And they were like free flying their emotions, their creativity, their political things, they're fighting injustice. We were raised by parents who actually thought the world was getting better. So we
Mm.
were actually like in this like sweet spot. The end of
Right.
the
Yeah.
20th century was like amazing. Women's lib. Oh my God.
Right.
Rights to vote for everybody. Abortion legal. It's going to be incredible. Like we, for a second in our formative little years, thought it was good. And
Mm.
then, and we thought progress. So I always say that the 21st century, and for people like us in our 20s, when all of a sudden we turn the corner and we're like, what? This doesn't look like what we
Mhm.
thought we were going
False.
to be
Yeah, just
doing.
all the things that you were hit with, like immediately as you turn the corner there, like, you know, with the whole
Yeah.
Iraq war and everything coming in, like, I mean, that's got to be
And
like a huge slap in the face, kind of, at
and
that point.
digital reality,
Oh, yeah,
that
right.
one, like the
Uh-huh.
threat of like, oh, excuse me, what do you mean? I don't
Yeah.
have my record, and oh, I don't have, like, everything kind of got lifted into this like basically the Big Brother world. The welcome to, what's it called again? The
It's the
Brave New
panopticon or
World.
something. Is that the
The
thing where it's
Brave New World. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe that too. But like that book where you're like all of a sudden like living in a surveillance freaky future where you don't have control
Yeah.
over yourself. And so there was a freedom in the 1900s that I feel anyone born and raised in that time kind of got tricked, and anyone born in the 21st century I think kind of have more realistic idea of what they're up against.
Well, I must.
Mhm.
Well, I guess no. We're Gen Xers. That's that kind of like
Yeah.
like reality bites. Like
Yeah.
this doesn't. Nothing's adding up. I'm hearing one thing and seeing a
Yeah,
whole different thing. But I guess a good
exactly.
question then is, where do you see or sense hope right now?
Well, rewind to what I just said 10 minutes ago about humanity, music, spirituality, creativity all being
Right.
endless,
Hmm.
eternal, always. And I
Yes.
still have faith in humans. Like I know for a fact, because I've probably met like 10, 100,000 human, the amount of humans I have interacted with, whether it is on stage, global stages, or, you know, press people or music executive or other, of course, freaky people in the circus of rock music. I mean, I ultimately have faith in humans. I definitely know that
Mm.
humans have a terribly self-destructive and violent streak. There is a lot of hunger for power and control, and mainly because they invented stupid money, which I hate. That's like just like this insane greed that kills everything. But so with the I still believe that that's the minority. It just so happens that the minority is controlling the majority. The
Yeah.
Hmm.
minority is I mean, and whatever happened to Occupy Wall Street, all these moments where we knew, so I think really money and corporate greed are the devil, no doubt. And that there's a, story of the crossroads of the devil, like the musicians who either go for the money or stay with the pure. So that's a good metaphor for whatever happened
Mm.
to us along the way. Humans sold their shit to the devil, which is a very bad force in the world, and it creates war and hate, as we know. And I ultimately think that that happens to be a smaller amount of people, but it is a stronger force,
Hmm.
because the people who just live and breathe and love and create, they're not, you know, they're not spending their time seeking that power to
Mm-hmm.
destroy and own. So I ultimately believe, Johnny, we met here in Hudson, New York, and as a Canadian raised by full-on socialist individuals who warned me about the US and their version of capitalism being the end of the world. So I was raised very, very, very aware of what extreme capitalism in America could look like in the end, which I believe is what we're seeing, like pariah, predatory capitalism, is that was always with me, that, oh, okay, that's very scary, but that I ultimately found a little world in upstate New York
Hmm.
where I realized that the socialist Canadian in me, who for whatever crazy reason had ended up in the US through the destiny of music, was going to just do my bit to have a little corner of the universe that reflected the values and the things that I had growing up in Montreal, with alternative music and alternative culture, and weirdos having affordable places to play music and see music and show art and have conversations. And ultimately, that's heaven, on earth, is if you can just
Hmm.
find your pocket. So as you know, like when I left music and became a mother, I like quickly changed gears. Like all the time I was in music, all I was trying to do is protect the integrity and the purity of my creation and my exchange with humans that worship music. The moment I put music down so that I could have a baby and not travel around the world, which was the only way I knew how to make music, is I created a little art center called Basilica Hudson, where I started shuffling all the people and the values and the things that I believed in into a reclaimed, ancient, crumbling factory, so that I could have a little corner and point to that, I believe this can exist. I
Mm.
believe that the world isn't so bad, that you actually can still have this, just like you have your radio show. I have now 13 years strong an alternative art center that gives a voice to independent, innovative, avant-garde arts and culture. And
Mm.
that's the best I can do, as well as be a mother to a human who's going to have to learn very strange tools for an unknown future.
Right. Well, I can say, having been blessed and lucky enough to have spent time in that space, the magic is real. I've felt transcendent and revelatory on so many levels in
Hmm.
that space. It's a real. If you can ever
I
make it to
agree.
upstate New York, Hudson,
Mm.
New York, it's right on the river, right near the Amtrak train station. You can't miss it. Looks like a.
Mm.
It looks. It's.
Industrial church is an
Yeah. That's
industrial church
literally what it
surrounded
is.
by mountains and skies and
Ugh.
river. It's like it's reclaiming of the industrial revolution that has been raping our planet for the last 150 years. It's humans that love humanity reclaiming it for beautiful purposes, and it's a nice tension between
Mm.
an ancient destructive dream of power and energy turn into, regenerating humans.
Literally, like there's a 24-hour drone that they do every year where it's just multiple dozens of artists come and they pass the baton. They'll drone in their own way, whether it's through throat singing
Mm.
or gondola players or not gondola.
Yeah,
What?
gondola, I like
Okay,
that.
yeah.
We should get them in the river.
Hey, we're
Yeah,
just working with it.
gongs,
Yes,
gongs,
gong
industrial
for
feedback.
24 hours, and
That's
people
amazing.
are
Yeah,
laying down just like
Mm-hmm.
absorbing it, some staying the
yeah,
whole time, some staying for 15 minutes. It's a choose your own adventure
Yeah,
of
it's
really mystical
an
proportions.
important like thing to have a place like that where people can be open and be free and just kind of be creative. I feel like it's
yeah.
hard to come by nowadays because I feel like everybody's so everything goes so fast.
Right, because
I
you
know,
can't, it's hard to
especially
find
in
in a
the,
church, so you might as
Yeah.
well reclaim the
yes,
role of the church in a reclaimed industrial.
yeah, yes. And I mean, the Bay Area, I hope, I mean, I'm just the Googleification of that poor city that was such a
Oh, yeah.
bastion of like incredible alternative, like the hearts of American subculture and exploratory psychedelic music. I mourn for that city without even having been there for years. I can feel it. Like I
But
feel it. Yeah.
but there's really like I'm sitting with two really solid representatives of well, like scenes that are still managing to burst through all that
Good.
nonsense. And like Alex is in a sick metal band, and Calvin is making films, and there's you just can't stop that force of
But is there
nature.
art space and there's art spaces
Wow.
in San Francisco or outside? Like where is it
Where do you guys
Oakland? Like
go?
where do you show? Where do you share the music and
Right.
movies?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of venues, like local venues you could play at. I'm from Sonoma County, which is like 45 minutes
Mhm.
north, and there's a lot of places to play there, and there's a lot of local shows around here as well. There's a pretty strong, at least metal scene, and I know there's like
a big punk scene too. Yeah,
and like psychedelic
Great.
rock as
Yeah.
well. So
Great.
there's a lot going on here
yeah.
still.
A lot of
Good.
the stuff is like a lot of DIY, house
Great.
things, or just you
Yeah.
throw it together wherever you can.
Isn't
I mean,
that
it's
interesting?
basically
It's really like
what's
the
going
people.
back to our time when I was your age, because the Reagan era retarded mainstream 80s hilarious world had created no space for that. And so other
Right.
than the UK with all the great like melancholic musicians of the 80s in the UK, America was just going like super whatever spandex / neon, and like that's when our scene was built, and all the DIY scenes, whether it's Fugazi and Discord in DC,
As a
or
response
obviously
to
all the
that, right?
Chicago. Yeah, so you're just doing the same thing, which is
Yep.
great. I just wish that there was more uncharted territories in space. The
Yep.
problem is that there's been like many years, decades of corporate development of of properties.
It's
So it's
embedded in all
harder
of
to
it. Yeah.
find locations, and it's like
Mhm.
housing crisis as well as, of course, performance space crisis. But I'm glad to hear that the creatives are thriving. It's
Hell
just
yeah.
if you don't have spaces to invite new creatives in to experience it, you're losing people to corporate reality,
Yep.
and they're going to go work for Google and Amazon because they didn't know there was an alternative,
Mm.
which is really rough.
And there's that word, alternative.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I wanted to ask you what you thought alternative music today looks like, because it is certainly very different than what it was in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's cool is like you're talking about metal bands and psychedelic. That's kind of been continuously, in my opinion, alternative to the mainstream. The only one that got fully devoured and destroyed was like the quote unquote grunge scene, even though there was elements of like alternative, but there was like the Jane's Addiction, the Pixies, who are like the father and mothers of our like grunge music hit that then gave birth to like Hootie and the Blowfish and whoever else
You're
copied it and turned it
Yeah.
into some other weird thing. Is that metal and psychedelic always stayed on the fringe. Of course Metallica is huge, and shout out for the Bay Area, but there's
Yeah.
not that many. I love Mastodon, is one of my favorite bands in the world.
Mhm.
I go to metal festivals when I can, and I still see that as still an alternative nation existing. Just because they have big crowds, that doesn't mean it's not alternative. It's not Taylor Swift, thank God.
Ugh.
And so the thing is, I think psychedelia and avant, any kind of really hard, bizarro, industrial and electronic music, and then of course super shredding metal. Any genre that's playing with challenging, unpleasant, unmainstream. You can't play it to your grandmother without one, or some grandmothers. I'm gonna be a cool grandmother. I'm gonna be calling for it. I'm like, give me the darkest,
Yes.
weirdest shit. I'm gonna hope that it's still being made. But I just mean whatever you can't play. Whoever these normal people are that still exist, I don't know who they are because I don't hang out with many of them. I actually never have, so I don't know.
Yeah.
My parents were freaks too, so I don't know many quote unquote normal people. But
Oh, you're blessed.
I
for
think
that.
if you're pushing the envelope and making things loud, uncomfortable, changing the tone of something that is, I think that's alternative, and I think there's a lot of great I can sort of like pick an example, like even in industrial, because obviously I am, or in like electronic, I'm obviously an analog person. Like I've never touched a industrial machine to make music. I don't know how. I don't use machines to make music. I use instruments.
Mm.
But there is, what I thought was exciting that started popping up in the 90s, whether it was the Chemical Brothers or even Fatboy Slim. And just like there was this moment of like, I saw, oh, wow, cool, alternative. Like that's an interesting new creation. And some of my favorite bands, because we have a music festival, we have the Drone, 24-hour Drone, like Johnny was talking about, which is really like not people who almost even put out albums. Like this is
Right.
just people who like make sound. Some of them have records, but very few of them. But we have that's our spring festival. And then in the fall, we have a thing called Soundscape, where some of the bands that have played, for example, are like Explosions in the Sky, Swans, Angel Olsen, like those are some of the bigger names, but then there's like Pharmacon but in those festivals, and we've been curating that for a decade, is the ones that I got most excited about that screamed to me like, oh, this is an interesting new alternative, is these these electronic noise things. So there's a UK guy called Blank Mass that came from Fuck Buttons. I don't know if you know either of them.
I know Blank Mass. I got to see him once, actually. I think it was at Desert Days in Los Angeles.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So he played Soundscape, and like just experiencing that kind of new formation of electronic to me was like exciting. People are still like trying new ways to make like uncomfortable, weird sounds. And I'm not doing this to plug my husband, who of course I love, but my husband did make a film that I think any alternative weirdo listening should look up. Is Ted K. It is a very immersive, freaky version of the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, who, as some may or may not know, was basically warning that tech and industrialization was going to destroy humanity and the planet. And he was a hermit who lived in a cabin for 25 years and sent mail bombs threatening, like, to basically try to get people. And when he was discovered, it was because he said he'd continue mailing bombs if his manifesto wasn't published. So he has a manifesto, which is like, if you remove the fact that an American terrorist who lived in a cabin alone, it's some of the most visionary writing about what was coming in the 80s and 90s. So my husband, Tony Stone, is an amazing director who makes difficult alternative, let's call them alternative movies. He's made some about the Norse discovery of America. He's made about alcoholic, struggling farmer. And then this one, Ted K., is about the Unabomber, but it's a very immersive story of a real left of center troubled individual who sees part of reality and warns and tries to warn in itself in a very destructive way what he sees coming. And Blank Mass scored it. So the score of Ted K. is released by Sacred Bones, which is one of our favorite New York labels, who everything they put out is alternative, quote unquote. They're kind of more in they have a very industrial, goth, ambient, very shadowy, darky catalog, but I would encourage anyone. I love, me, my husband, and my daughter all wear Sacred Bones merch. We're like big fans of that label, but they also